So during my little playing around touring the dial of the various delays on the timeline MX, I was using uh, an EHX tack decay on Chapman stick. Partially I just kind of needed something to give it a little preamp. Um, but what you tend to do with a stick, um, as far as I know. But I do find it to be a very useful effect for something like stick, which has a very articulate, sound. That almost like a harpsichord can be kind of tinny. I think being able to round that out is awful nice, and that's something the attack decay does. And the attack decay I kind of see as an evolution of something like the Boss slow gear, which when you look at it was a swell pedal, auto swell. I think is kind of the generic term. But when you look at it, it was basically at that time basically a noise gate, and it would, just look for a signal that was past the threshold level and then open the noise gate. But it had a system to bring that up slowly, to ramp that up slowly, hence the swell. The thing is, as long as the signal was above the threshold level, that gate would stay open. So the practical upshot of that is your first note might swell, but then if you play into that while it's still up high, your second note and your third note, as long as it was above the threshold, would sound like a normal note. All the attack would be there. So I found the practical upshot with that um, you might be trying to play these flowing legato tied lines, but you had to play not quite staccato, but you had to make it very well defined, and you had to, um, when when you sounded your first note, you had to make sure to dampen that or stop that, give it, just that certain time value, and then, so the noise gate would close, and then you could sound your next note. So you had this very, you're hearing and you're thinking sort of in flowing lines often. You tend to get these, you tend to have to play it in this very defined way. Uh, and that's something I think the attack decay does better. And it's something I used to write the company sometimes. What you really need is here, if you can see the little light there, it's a pluck detector. I think they're just looking for a transient. I don't know how they have it, like in the frequencies, if they're looking for, maybe the narrow frequency band where you get transient spikes from a strike or that kind of thing. But you get you see it light up if you can. No, it's not. Oh, it's because it's on poly. There you go. There you go. But you get the that's the pluck detect. It's actually doing the job. It's just another mode. Doesn't really display that, but has some awareness of it that's similar. And we'll discuss that in a moment. Uh, but so that's a big thing because you can play in whatever kind of lines. And it's just listening for that pluck. Um, it has an attack control and a decay control. So the idea there is to get kind of very much these reverse tape sounds, so you can get a swell, but then you can even have a decay that just abruptly turns it off. If you're trying to get a real defined, let me kill the reverb. Kind of kills that. So you're that's where if you're really trying to get that backward sound, but often just to kill the attack, like a slow gear, just turn the decay all the way up, and that becomes they say off. Just it doesn't ever truncate the signal. So then you can just use it as just kind of an attack. Now that's here's it all the way off. I mean, bypassed. That's very articulate. Here's it at minimum. Now I think I got a little more level on it. That's just for the video, but it's still very. I think that's 4 milliseconds or something. Now I think one thing about it is I suspect it's digital, and I suspect they're doing a little bit of a look ahead. What compressors do that sometimes, where when you're dealing with something with dynamics, sometimes what you'll do is, it's impossible. You can't really instantly react to something, so delay your audio signal by just a little bit, and but you read the input signal and whatever process you want going on, it's got a little bit of a head start. It essentially looked ahead to see if there's like a transient coming. And I think that makes it smooth and makes that pluck detection work well. Sonos has a volume pedal that has a bunch of dynamics features, and it does have a swell, but it's all analog. And the funny thing is, you can hear the initial tick of the attack before the system recognizes what's going on. That's where I think a look ahead helps. And this is an all digital unit. But being digital, it's got a couple of things. This is kind of a, we go from that, we can, to swells. I think it goes up to like 8 seconds, I believe. Swelling to full. But there is a middle ground for something like stick or something where you can kind of just mellow out and that's maybe even a little on the high spot, where you can kind of get rid of the real aggressive attack. So you still got kind of more of a plucked sound than a tapped sound, which it gets pretty articulate. So you can just kind of mellow that out, which is real nice. With a little EQ, you're good to go. But there's, if you notice, the interesting thing about this is, I'll give it a little more juice so we get more into the swells territory. Now, in this mode, the monophonic mode, there's the poly button right there. What it does is it just looks at the signal as one, holistic signal, and just adjusts essentially, the volume, the level of the signal is one big hunk. So what happens is I can play that and get a swell. When I play this next note, it'll swell, but if you notice what it's doing is it's turning down basically the volume knob. It's turning that down and swelling back in, but that's the whole program, so that includes both notes, which isn't bad. It is an effect. There is another option, poly mode. Now, what this is using is, I think this is leveraging, and I suspect it's leveraging it's essentially, I think, a granular capture system like the freeze pedals use, and the Pog and the Hog use, and the Super Ego, and all those kinds of pedals, even the things that'll do the organs and all that. It seems to be a code base that even the sitar thing seems to be a code base that they're using, that a core technology that they're really exploiting. Because here, what it'll do is it's really essentially doing some kind of hold or single note identification. Because then you can, now if you notice, the other notes ring through and aren't affected by the swell of the newest note, of the Johnny Come Lately note. So that's a neat feature. There is a little bit of a change in the timbre. So is it completely natural? Not necessarily. It's pretty good most of the time. I would say, or at least a good amount of the time. I can definitely there can be a little bit of a synthetic feel to it for sure. It gets, if you use there is an onboard, let me turn it on mono for a second. There's an onboard overdrive, excuse me, to give, I think it's mainly to give the signal, because you're having this decaying signal, it gives a little bit of more compression and harmonic bite. There's more harmonics. Because, so often with an instrument like a guitar or something where you get a lot of harmonics up front that decay into kind of just a sine after a while. And then so if you're doing a swell, you're swelling into when the sound's just too mellow. So they added that to give it a little more bite. As you swell, you don't just swell into this kind of dull tail of a note. It can create some problems like missed triggers or things of that nature. And I have noticed for the poly mode, I don't know if I can get it to happen, but it depends on the settings, and I think it works more with guitar, uh, is you can get some burbling and it just sort of falls apart. And I think that tends to be if you really run the gain up a lot higher. That's actually behaving quite well. I have seen it just freak out and go blah, 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 blah. It almost sounds like, oh, they're getting that kind of, but you'll get that with notes. Um, I have seen that with, like, it almost sounds something like an octave divider when there's a decay and it starts tracking things besides the fundamental and starts going blah, 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 and hopping around and doesn't know what to do, or if you hit too many notes, uh, and that kind of thing. But overall, it's really a nice effect. One thing that I really like about it, and they made a Pico version, a small version. One thing I think they really missed the boat on is this has an expression pedal, and it's the EHX style where you can have all the knobs in one in one configuration in the toe, can have all the knobs in a different configuration, and you can move back and forth. But what's really nice about that is even if you're just to control, say, the attack knob, um, is you can get a, you could roll it back all the way so the heel and kind of almost an always on. I think for a lot of guitar players, always on might be a bit much, but say per song or per section, you could have a, depending on if you're okay with that tone, you could have just your kind of regular attack, but then be able to roll in however much swell you want. Especially if you're doing improvisational type stuff, I could see where that'd be real nice. Where you just kind of, it's almost like thinking about like hitting an overdrive harder or less hard kind of thing. Where it's like how much swell do I want, and you can control it real time. So that, I think, especially for something like stick, as I learn stick, I suspect I'll want to get into that. Um, but it's a neat effect. I just kind of figure I'll noodle around on it for, now that I've talked at you for a little bit, noodle around on it for a little bit. But I did just kind of want to cover how it works. Anyway, I think it's a really a little gem of a pedal that does. It's one of those things that does one or two things, but it does them real well, and it's real focused on that. And you're not going to get. I don't think you're going to get too lost in the weeds on that. One thing, and I'll have to play with this, but I suspect, because you can do the memorization from heel to toe, doesn't mean you have to do the whole sweep of the knob. I think there'll be a sweet spot, especially, you can store like three different presets, but if you just kind of want to do um, a scrub off the decay, but not get too far into the swells, maybe just a little bit of a hint of a swell, you're talking right in that zone right there. So I think you could set the whole travel of the treadle of the expression pedal for that to get a little finer control on that. Uh, there are a couple of different curves, I think, too. There's the manual's kind of nice, stupid human tricks, and there are a couple of things I didn't cover, like you can use the pedal to trigger the swell, so you can kind of use it as a triggered swell pedal if you just want to grab a couple of little swells. Um, I think there's the block diagram, which is nice. There's, I believe, a touch of onboard compression, again, to give to allow some swell. Here we are, to allow some swell um, while still having enough signal to swell into. And there's three different curves you can use to get the feel of the fade right. It's a very feel based thing, so that might help a little bit too with finding that sweet spot with the attack. Something I'll have to play with a little bit more, but I did just kind of want to cover that and noodle with it again, sort of feeling out the levels and things. So as always, thank you very much, and I am gonna go walk the dog.